What if just being born in the U.S. didn't automatically make you a citizen?
Oh, wow.
It's kind of hard to imagine, right? I mean, that's like one of the things America is known for.
Yeah, that's one of the first things you learn in like elementary school civics class.
Right. Be born here, you're a citizen.
Yeah.
But that was like the huge controversy with President Trump's executive order that was going to end birthright citizenship.
Yeah, that was a big one.
So that's what we're diving deep into today.
It's a really fascinating topic, and for you, the listener, this isn't just like looking back at old news. It's really about what does it even mean to be an American?
Right.
And it still like continues to come up in our arguments about immigration these days.
Absolutely.
And we've got some really interesting stuff to look at today, including a really good article that breaks down Trump's whole plan and like what could have happened.
Yeah, we want to be clear. Our goal here isn't to like pick sides or tell you what to think.
Yeah.
It's more to just understand, where did birthright citizenship come from? Why were people trying to change it? And like, what are other countries doing?
Right.
What are the arguments on both sides of this?
Yeah, let's unpack all of that.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, so let's start right at the beginning
Okay.
with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
Okay.
This is where birthright citizenship comes from in America,
Right.
back in 1868.
Yeah, and it wasn't just like some random thing they added.
Yeah.
Like they really thought about this.
Right.
It was after the Civil War.
Right.
They wanted to make sure formerly enslaved people would be citizens.
Like their kids would be citizens too.
Exactly, and it's written right there in the amendment.
All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States.
Straightforward, right?
Seems pretty clear.
Yeah, you would think so.
But figuring out what that phrase really means has been like the whole problem.
Yeah, that one little phrase
Yeah.
has caused so much debate.
So then we fast forward to 1898.
Okay.
We've got this really important Supreme Court case.
Oh, yeah, United States versus Wong Kim Ark.
Exactly.
This was a big turning point.
It
The
was.
Supreme Court said, even if your parents aren't citizens, but you're born in the U.S., you're a citizen.
Wow.
And that's how it's been for over 100 years.
Until President Trump came along and said, well, maybe we're reading that subject to the jurisdiction thereof part wrong.
Right,
Like that's what his executive order was all about.
right.
So why did his administration even want to change things? What was their argument?
So they had a few big reasons they wanted to do this. One of the main ones was they wanted to stop illegal immigration.
Okay.
So they were using that anchor baby argument.
What's that?
So the idea is that if you know your baby will be a citizen, if it's born in the U.S., that makes people want to come here illegally,
Okay.
even if they're not supposed to be here,
Right.
just so their baby can have citizenship.
Oh, so that's like an incentive to come illegally.
Exactly. And the Justice Department even said this was part of chain migration.
What's chain migration?
So once the kid's a citizen, they can sponsor their family members to come too later on.
Got it.
So it just keeps going.
So what else were they worried about?
Another thing they were really focused on was birth tourism.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
So this is where, like, women will travel to the U.S. just to give birth,
Wow.
specifically so their baby can be an American citizen.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the Center for Immigration Studies, they said it happens like 33,000 times every year.
33,000.
Yeah, the administration said this is basically like a loophole people were using.
33,000 does sound like a lot, but in a country with millions of births every year, is that really that big of a deal?
That's a good point. 33,000, it is a lot of people, but compared to everyone else being born here and all the other immigrants, it's not a huge percentage.
Huh?
But the administration, their argument wasn't really about the numbers. It was about, like, the idea of people using this system to get citizenship.
I see.
It was about the principle of it.
Okay, so they didn't like that.
Yeah.
And then there was the whole thing about how they were reading the 14th Amendment differently.
Right.
What was going on with that?
So they were really focused on that subject to the jurisdiction thereof
Uh-huh.
part of the amendment.
Okay.
And they were basically saying everyone's been reading it wrong for like the last 100 years.
Okay.
They said it shouldn't apply to people who are here illegally or even people here on like a temporary visa
Interesting.
because those people are still under the rules of their home country.
So they're not fully under the U.S.'s jurisdiction like the amendment talks about.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a pretty different way to read it.
It is, yeah.
And to support their people who agree with this change, they point to other countries.
Yeah, they'll say, look around the world.
Right.
America's doing this weird thing.
Exactly. Our article said the U.S. is actually one of the few countries that gives automatic birthright citizenship.
Yeah, only about 30 countries do it, and most of those are in North and South America.
Right.
The rest of the world, especially in Europe, Asia,
Yeah.
Africa, they do things way different.
So how is it different?
So they have this thing called jus sanguinis.
Just sanguis.
It means like right of blood.
Okay.
So basically, in those countries, your citizenship comes from your parents, not where you're born.
So, like, if you're born in France, but your parents are from China, you'd be a citizen of China.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you're born, it's about your parents.
Right. It's about your bloodline.
And the article mentions some countries that have changed their laws, too.
Yeah. Like Ireland in 2004, they got rid of automatic birthright citizenship.
Wow.
Now, if you want your kid to be a citizen, at least one parent has to be a citizen or like have a green card.
Okay.
And India did the same thing that same year because they were having problems with illegal immigration from Bangladesh.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the Dominican Republic. Their situation's a little more complicated, but they made it a lot harder to become a citizen there. And it mostly affected people from Haiti.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of European countries, even though they do that right of blood thing, they'll still give citizenship to kids born there if they would be stateless otherwise.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, they don't want kids to be without a country.
Right.
So it's not always black and white.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we've seen that America's way of doing things is not how most countries do it.
Right.
So what were the other reasons people supported President Trump's plan?
Okay, so besides the arguments about illegal immigration and birth tourism, one of the big things they talked about was national sovereignty and national identity.
Oh, okay.
Basically, they're saying citizenship shouldn't just be about where you happen to be born.
Right.
It should be something you choose, and it should mean you really believe in American values.
Right.
So then everyone would be more united.
Oh, I see. That's an interesting point. So it's not just an accident of birth. It's about choosing to be American.
Exactly.
I think I heard them talk about money, too, right? Like the cost of public services.
Oh, yeah, that was another big argument.
What did they say about that?
They said that when babies automatically become citizens, it puts a lot of stress on stuff like healthcare, education, welfare programs, all that.
Okay.
They even pointed to studies that showed families here illegally, they often use more government services than they pay in taxes.
Of course, there are always different sides to those kinds of studies.
Right, exactly.
But that was their argument.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's that whole thing about just doing what other countries do right.
Yeah, they said since most developed countries have stricter citizenship laws, it's time for the U.S. to catch up.
Okay.
Basically, they see our birthright citizenship as, like, outdated.
They want to modernize it.
Exactly.
Okay, so those are some of the main points for changing things.
Right.
What about the arguments against ending birthright citizenship? I'm guessing the Constitution was a big part of that.
Yeah, that was the biggest one by far.
Okay.
Almost every legal expert agrees that ending birthright citizenship would go against the 14th Amendment.
Right.
They say the amendment is clear, and the Supreme Court has always agreed with this for over 100 years.
Like with that Wong Kim Ark case we talked about.
Exactly.
So they're saying you can't just change the Constitution with an executive order.
Oh, it's way more complicated than that.
It would have to be a whole amendment process.
Exactly. Can't just erase it with a pen.
Right. That's a big deal.
Yeah, huge.
So what else did people bring up?
Another big worry was that a lot of kids could end up stateless.
Stateless? What does that mean?
So if a kid is born here, but their parents are undocumented or just here on a visa, and their home country doesn't give them citizenship, then they wouldn't belong to any country.
Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah, it would be like they don't exist legally.
And there's also just the idea that it's not fair to punish kids for what their parents did.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's a huge moral argument.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying every kid born here deserves a chance to succeed.
It's the American dream,
Right.
no matter where their family comes from.
And it shouldn't matter if their parents made a mistake.
Right.
It's not the kid's fault.
And practically speaking, I bet there would be a ton of problems trying to figure out everyone's immigration status.
Oh, yeah, that was another big criticism.
Yeah.
People said, imagine trying to check the papers of every single parent having a baby in America.
Right.
It would be a nightmare.
So much paperwork, so much time and money.
Exactly. And it would be really easy to make mistakes or even discriminate against certain people.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So it sounds like President Trump's executive order would have faced a ton of legal challenges.
Yeah, it did immediately, actually.
And the article talked about maybe it going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
What do you think would have happened?
Well, hard to say for sure what the Supreme Court would do,
Right.
but it would be a huge deal if they decided to overturn something that's been in place for so long.
Right.
It would be a massive change.
And even if the courts stop the executive order, the debate might not go away, right?
Right. Some people have talked about trying to amend the Constitution.
Is that even possible?
It's possible, but it's really, really hard.
Right.
You need a supermajority in both the House and the Senate, and then 3/4 of the states have to agree to.
And in our political climate, that seems unlikely.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine everyone coming together on something this controversial.
Right.
But public opinion can change things.
Right, if enough people feel strongly about it.
Exactly.
So it seems like the future of birthright citizenship is still up in the air.
Yeah, there could be more legal battles, more arguments, and who knows what will happen.
So for you listening, why should you even care about all this?
Right.
It's not just some boring legal stuff. This is about, like, who we are as a country.
Yeah, it's about the meaning of being an American.
And it's about how we handle immigration.
Exactly.
If you want to have real conversations about the future of America, you need to understand these arguments.
Absolutely.
So think about this.
Okay.
Beyond the laws and the politics, what does birthright citizenship really say about our values?
Yeah.
What does it say about how we treat people born here,
Right.
no matter what their parents are like?
That's a bigger question.
It's about the long term, not just what's happening right now.
Yeah, that's what we really need to think about.